So the question that is one of the questions that I'm pondering is what ancient practices, i.e., rhythms of the church, monastic communities, things that have been our inheritance as the people of God, do we need to embrace to actually help us with the day that we find ourselves in? And so, one of the things that I had the privilege of going and spending some time at a monastery, it was technically an abbey in Australia, and they were a Benedictine order, and they were the only Benedictine order that was not Roman Catholic in the entire world. They were Anglican. The Anglican Church in Australia is very different from the Anglican Church in America, in England. Story for another day. But they lived this rhythm of 5 offices of prayer. The first one started at like 5 a.m. And so when I was staying with them, they're like, "You're welcome to come and hang out with us." I'm like, "I'm probably going to see you at 9 o'clock mass if I'm real. 5's not going to happen." But they would actually have a vow of silence from midday, from lunch until the next morning. And so I came into this rhythm with them. And you're sitting there eating lunch and you're thinking you could make no noise whatsoever. So I'm trying not to use my knife and fork too loudly, but it's really, we're just not talking. And so it was contemplation, it was stillness. And what I found the fruit of it was for me, the first night, this is pre-Wi-Fi, smartphones, there's no TV in the guest house. So I'm sitting there having to deal with all this noise that's in me. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Just by being in stillness, by being in a community that was intentionally creating space for silence, I actually had to come to grips with myself. And so that was an incredible process for a couple of days. It became part of the rhythm of my life. So that experience for me, and we all meet people in ministry where they're so busy, so noisy, like everything's go, 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 influence, got to do this, Facebook Live, but all this stuff that you can see this inward momentum in them that they're going to collapse.
Oh, yeah.
So...
And I've watched them collapse.
Yeah. All of that to say, what is it in your worlds that you've engaged with that's an ancient practice? I know you love contemplation.
Oh, yeah.
So what are some of these things that we can draw on that are actually going to help propel us into the day we find ourselves
in? When I first became a believer, I ran into this book, probably in the first 3 years, called The Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And he goes through 12 different disciplines. He has the inward disciplines, the outward disciplines, and the upward disciplines. Ones that are dealing with your own soul, ones that are about service and other people, ones that are your relationship with God. And it developed this understanding, because he deals with some of the idolatry of disciplines. Because sometimes you can make an idolatry of it, an idolatry of fasting or an idolatry of silence. So he deals with the problems that come with it, but also very practically how you do it. And it completely reoriented something. I ended up teaching that as a class 7 or 8 times. Oh, wow. So I went through for about 4 years. That was my lifestyle of those disciplines, practicing them, thinking about them, doing them, talking about them, experiencing them. And it set something into my life that I got fascinated in a beautiful way with getting rid of the noise to actually find Jesus, to actually getting beyond the activity that, because the picture of water, it's real easy to get waves on the water when there's not a lot of activity in the water, because it's what's happening out on the surface. But when you get down into the current, like if the current is moving, it doesn't matter what the waves are doing, you're going to go with the current. And when we get beyond the surface level and start going deep in our lives and we set a current of a life with God, it's going to propel us in that direction in a way that nothing else will. It's probably the richest, I could say that of a few different things, but there's so much benefit that I can see over the last 2 decades since that season. And it's not like that season and then it was over. Like that started something that has become, it's the way that I do life. And it keeps on deepening. Like I thought I knew it back then. And then I went through emotionally healthy spirituality, and Pete Scazzaro talks about contemplative spirituality as a way to take our discipleship deeper so that we actually find real change. And that took it a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And I mean, like every season I find myself going deeper to where right now, I mean, I'm planning out 2023, 2024. We're right at the end of 2022 when we're recording this. And I've already got a 3-month sabbatical built into 2024 because the values that I've developed from that time to slow down. And watching friends of mine burn out. I've seen some of them that never made it back, some of them that make it back and they're a shell of who they used to be. They're really good at doing the motions. And, the average person that doesn't actually know their heart might think that they're back. They're not back. And then I've seen some that have actually recovered. But it's rare that people really recover from burnout. It's scary.
Well, if I'm being totally honest, this is probably the area I struggle in the most. I am by nature very, very busy. I'm a doer. I think sometimes even as a mom, you're kind of running the house, and then here at Streams, the position that I play is operational. So I have a lot of get it done kind of things, and that's in the day to day. And I've found that it has caused a little bit of a struggle in me that I have to really fight. I have to really hold on to discipline, not to make my time with the Lord that way, not to make it about accomplishing something, because everything else in my life is about accomplishing something. It can be so easy to be like, well, this is what I do. I worship, and then I read, and then I journal, and then and we recently did emotionally healthy spirituality again, and which I think is something that I just have to do frequently. And we have this day by day, and it's just 2 minutes of silence. And I was shocked at how long it had been since I'd really been just silent, just not trying to accomplish something in my time with the Lord. And I know that. I know the truth. I know these things. I've read Celebration of Discipline. I've had long seasons of such sweet discipline with the Lord. And so I think one of the questions I have, for all of us to ponder is, do we set ourselves up for success in that? So it's one thing to say, should we bring it back? But it could just be one more thing to feel guilty and to feel like you're failing in if we don't set ourselves up for success. So, if we don't take a sabbatical, if we don't, go to, and not everyone can do those things, right? So some people are in a position, they work in corporate America or whatever, and they get 2 weeks off a year, and they have to spend that with their family too. And so what are the ways that we can do that in our day to day? I think things like what Pete Scazzaro teaches, is learning how to be really contemplative, really silent before the Lord. I love Lectio. I always say this wrong. I add an extra vowel every time. Lectio Divina.
Got it.
There we go. I always call it Divinia or something. I don't know. Every time I'm like, and I taught Latin. Help me understand that. But anyway, I love just sitting before the Lord and praying scripture back and really chewing on these verses and doing that. But I have to carve out the time and the space to be disciplined to do that. And so I didn't want to shoot this episode and just act like I had it all together, because my guess is there are going to be a lot of people listening to this conversation who are like, well, that's great for you, but my schedule, my kids wake up at 5 a.m. and we go until 11 p.m. So where in there? So here are some things that I have found. When I was working full-time, not in a place that I could step in. I have a chair in my office that I'll just close my door and put do not disturb and sit in, or I'll go into the prayer room. But when I was working in an office, I would just go sit in my car. That was literally the only time that I could just have silence. And you just don't realize how much you don't have silence, And so seems like if I set my alarm for 6, my kids woke up at 5:55. If I set it for 5, they woke up at 4. You know what I mean? It was one of those just sort of battles. And so sitting in my car for 20 minutes, it didn't even have to be long, at lunch. Sometimes on the way home, I will, and not to always bring everything back to our grief, but our son's grave is near. And so it's very interesting to me, but that's a place that's very silent. And I don't even mean that corny, but there's like a reverence, and so you can just kind of go and sit and do that. And so I think my encouragement in all of this is sometimes it's not days. Sometimes it's not 3 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just quieting, that. And so why is it important to bring those things back? Because exactly every single episode, what we have been talking about is it's that intimate place with the Lord that you just can't get by checking the box.
Yeah.
You need it.
That's so
Yeah.
good. I really love what you shared about that because I think it speaks to how it's not one size fits all and that we all have very different schedules. We have very different personalities. And so what's going to make you experience the stillness and the intimacy of God may not at all for someone else. And so I think my encouragement too would be try it. Just give it a try. Even if you only have 10 minutes, you only have 5 minutes, find that little pocket of time where you can try out Lectio Divina, where you can try out just sitting in silence with the Lord, whatever that looks like for you, and say, how is this creating more intimacy with me and the Lord? Is this helping me to understand his goodness and see him more fully? And if it doesn't, if you find your mind going a million directions, I would try it a few times because it's a learning curve. But if you don't see that, try a different method. Because when you find that method that really works on your heart and really pulls you in, it's life-changing. And so I think it's really just that reminder of it doesn't have to look the same for every person.
Yeah.
And I think this ties into quiet time too. I've had so many people tell me, oh, well, if you don't have quiet time in the mornings, you're a sinner. If you don't have it in the evenings, you're a sinner.
Yep.
Right? And that's so funny to me because I'm like, we're all sinners, But the way that we relate to the Lord, the way that we can have that time to get away with him is going to look different. We have different lives. The importance is that you're prioritizing time with your Father and that it's not just a checklist item. It really is intentional, dedicated time. Because just like you, Charity, I struggle so much because I'm very type A. My entire world is lists. I go down my checklist and I check, and that's how I get through each day. And so with my time with the Lord, I had to turn off that part of my brain and just go, Lord, you're not a checklist item. I'm present with you. I'm sitting with you. And that type A in me will try to come back and be like, okay, what do I have to do after this? Nothing. It doesn't matter. We're present in this moment. And so I think it's just finding what works for you and then holding yourself accountable for that time that you've set aside and then holding yourself current and present in the moment. Really, really engaging, even when you want to drift or it's difficult or maybe it's uncomfortable. Because like you were saying, we've got a lot of noise in us. And when we still, it can feel very foreign and very uncomfortable. So just pushing through that.
Yeah. That thing about being present, that is so important. And it's not easy to maintain. Like, it's a journey I've been on for 20 years. And yesterday I'm reading in scripture. And I realize, okay, those words have just gone through my eyes, and I'm not sure if they actually hit my brain.
Yeah.
I'm not actually here right now.
Yeah.
I was thinking about what I was going to be doing, getting into work, different things.
Yeah.
And I catch myself in that a lot. And I've learned this prayer. What I'll do is I'll stop and I'll close my eyes and just sit there until I can feel his presence. And I'm like, Lord, I'm not here to read. I'm not here for information. I'm here to meet with you. I want to be aware of you. And sometimes it gets just these two word prayers, right here, right now. Lord, I'm here now. I'm here now. And I just have to hold on and fight to come back to that and then start over.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
so good.
but it's a constant thing. It's not oh yeah, I've got this right and I figured it out. I can do this. It never changes, really.
I think, I'm sorry. You go
No,
ahead.
you definitely go.
I was just going to say, I think place has a lot to do with that too. So if you have a busy life and a busy brain, you have the discipline to slow that down. But then there are these steps that you have to take, these parts. So I have a closet that I have to go sit in. There are no windows. There's one way in, there's one way out. It sort of isolates me. And I've just found in order to have the discipline to be quiet and still before the Lord, I have to make a space for that. So I think that's my other encouragement. I remember when my kids were little, I would try to do it in my bed. Well, here come little feet hopping in the bed, or Casey on his way to work is talking to me or whatever. And so it seems so silly and it seems small, but I think it's just all these little things of setting yourself up to be successful.
And I think some of the, if I can say it this way, the spiritual gymnastics that we go through at times, where it's got to be X, Y, and Z, the difficulty of contemplation is that you're left with you.
Yeah.
Like you can
Yes.
pray a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's the rhythms of prayers. There's different things that you can do. They're great because they really do anchor your heart in. But when you're really coming before the Lord and all the distractions there, Madame Guyon would say, "Thank the Lord that this is what He intended during that time." And there's a deep trust that gets cultivated even when you're distracted. The issues of life are popping off constantly. It's actually intentional because Guyon would be literally, she'd be like, all of this is under the hand of the Lord. Even the distractions are under the hand of the Lord.
Yes.
So why some people get uncomfortable with silence is they're not really dealing with the issues of life. And those issues are surfacing in that moment. Because I always know when I go to churches, we're in worship, right? I'm not the stand up, hands up guy. I literally have to sit down and have to go inward to hear the Lord. Because in the noise, because I love looking at people. I find people endlessly fascinating. I'm like, what are you thinking? What is that? Like, that's how I'm wired. So in worship, I sit and I go inward.
Yeah.
And what I found is in the quiet, right, two things are going to happen. One, I hear Him. Number two, I hear me.
Yeah.
And me is more confronting at times than Him.
So true.
Because you'll go to sit, you'll go to open scriptures, whatever it is. But what I found was years ago, before I went and stayed at the monastery, I did different prayers on different days. Monday I prayed for family, Tuesday for friends. I was just trying to structure my world a little bit. Thursday was silence. Half an hour by the clock. Now I know not everybody watching this, you're going to have half an hour. I totally get it. But for me, I had half an hour. And I would sit and I'd be like, no, stop thinking. No, you're thinking now. Like this constant, we've all been there, right?
Yes.
I'm thinking about thinking.
But what happened was during that season of my life, I had a very anxious mind. Even though I'd been delivered from anxiety, I had cultivated anxious thinking.
Yeah.
Wow.
What I found was over a bigger period of time, not only was I able to come into silence much easier on Thursday morning, I was actually still the rest of the week. And to be honest, I haven't had an anxious mind since.
Wow.
Because
really
what
good.
it was is, Psalm 46:10, it's probably on some of your mugs. Be still and know that I am God. It can be translated, the word for be still in the Hebrew actually means to be slackened, grow faint, or emptied of strength. And so to know God in that Hebrew sense is yada, to have intimacy and union with Him. So the invitation from the psalmist is be emptied of your own strength and come into union with God. And most of contemplation, most of these rhythms, we're so used to, okay, I've got to pray through, I've got to contend, there's lots of us. It's the opposite. You actually can't do contemplation. What I found is you actually have to let go.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And that's the process that's so difficult for us at times is, you mean, like, if you have your prayer language, you mean I don't have to warfare in tongues for 30 minutes? There's a place for that. But this is union. Like, I'm not going to like it's literally sitting with the Lord and recognizing that He's a lot slower to speak than we think He is. Because everyone's like, well, God's talking all the time. Well, there was 400 years of silence in the intertestamental period between Malachi and Matthew. God can hold His tongue, apparently. So there's a place of like, but you know what I mean? Like, there's within our prophetic culture,
Right.
God is saying or prophesying all the time. And I would just love to see the look on Jesus' face. He's like, it's nothing to do with me. I don't know what that is. For real. He's got a sense of humor.
agree.
I don't think he's thinking like, I don't know what that is, but I'm still interceding for you. But in that process of waiting for the Lord to speak, because I think that's the intimacy part. Like, I'm
Yeah.
present,
Yeah.
right? When you're familiar with somebody, like if I go for a drive with my dad, we'll go fishing. We can spend 45 minutes in the car not saying a word. And I'm not awkward at all
Right.
because I'm known and I know him.
Yeah.
So we can sit and I can just look out the window as we're driving to go fishing somewhere and I'm just present.
Mhm.
And my father's not saying anything and I'm not saying anything, but we're present.
Mhm.
That's the key in my experience to contemplation, to stillness, to these practices is learning to be present to the one who is present.
Yeah.
And that whole
So
thing of
key.
like face to face in the Hebrew, panim to panim is presence to presence. It's
Yeah.
present to present. And so the reason why it's a struggle for a lot of us, I mean, like you said, I'm thinking I've got this thing nailed. Yeah, cool. The inner life, we're there. Awesome. Grab my cup of coffee. I'm ready to meet with you, Lord. 20 minutes later, I'm scrolling. I'm like, well, sorry, phone. Yeah, sorry about it. But
Yep.
there's so many things. Yeah, I do it all the time.
No, it's serious.
And then I'm
This
the
is
guy.
real.
I'm the guy on social media watching your comments, trying not to be a keyboard warrior, going, "You think that's biblically accurate? What has this got to do with my intimacy with the Lord?" That's my morning, right? And I'm like, okay, you're too riled up. It's not even 10 o'clock. You're ready to go on the warpath. But I'm finding, as I'm embracing, authors like Madame Guyon or Basilia Schlink, or, go back, like Murray, you mentioned Foster, Dallas Willard. Like there's so many resources to grab that you find that this is actually the ancient pathway.
Right.
When Joshua in Exodus, Moses would leave the tent of meeting, Joshua remained.
Yeah.
So the next generation was actually prepared in the presence.
Mhm.
Yes.
And he sat in the tent of meeting. So there's something far more profound in the exchange of being present. We're thinking it's got to be like vision or no. If he's in the room and your heart has drawn him, the creator of all things is drawn to you in the room, just sit in it and watch what he does. I think it's as simple as that.
You're really I wish I had a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen. I don't even use a pencil, but whatever. This is intriguing me thinking about doing inner healing sessions. And I had the thought like, oh, this is something we've read. We know, we've studied. Like I read these books. You know what I'm saying? So we've read and studied that. I'm so curious about people that haven't. So they might come into an inner healing session, and what I want them to do is be present with the Lord. That's really what the whole thing is about, is finding a piece of silence, getting still before the Lord and hearing how he wants to minister to their hearts. And it's different than, we are asking for a vision and for him to show up and all of that. So we are doing that. It's not contemplative, but it's intriguing me now to think about people don't have this skill. And I'm asking them to walk in and just immediately use this skill. I've got to do a better job of kind of talking through the skill even before we go there. Yeah. So that was a total side note, but that was really good.
But an important one. That's
Yeah.
good.
That was really good.
Sometimes I think about that getting to that place of silence. I use the metaphor, the picture of a PC. I'm a Mac guy. It's a lot easier. I don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff. But when I had a PC, one of the things you have to do is you have to defrag it periodically.
Mm-hmm.
And if you wait a long time between defrags, it can take hours to defrag because you got all these little fragments going every place and you're trying to figure out how to get them all back. You're telling the computer to find them all. And sometimes that silence is kind of like defrag for our minds. Like we sit down, it's like the mind's like, it's all, the more often we practice it, it's not that goes away, but it doesn't take as long.
Yeah.
It becomes easier and easier to come to that place of, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that, and that sense of all is right with the world because the one who carried it, I can feel in this moment.
Yeah, that's good.
That sense, and talking about anxiety, like what it does for the anxiety levels, what it does for the tyranny. I think about Israel pulled out of Egypt, and when they're told that they can go and worship God, that God actually wants them, the first thing that happens is the enemy makes sure that they get super busy so that they stop dreaming about actually meeting with God. And there's a tyranny, a slavery to busyness, and we don't realize how enslaved we are in the world that we're in. But once we start coming out and we start experiencing him and having that taste, and, we've got, it's not 2,000 years. I mean, we've got 2,000 years of Christian experience, but we've got like 5,000 years of contemplative life that we have inherited of what it's like to be with God, to spend time with him regularly, to develop these habits. And we're not going to discover something new today that's going to be better than that. I mean, these are people that that, had experiences. I'm looking for and I want, but I have yet to have God show up at my door and ask to come in and have a meal with me like he did with Abraham. Like that, like talk about blowing your mind, but he did. And the life that he had with God, we're not going to improve on that. We're not going to improve on that. But we can take that and we can use it as an example and bring it into our day. And yes, our day is different, but every day is different. But the reality is the difference is the similarity, because it may be different, but it's actually the same. And that's what we've missed. And these things, they anchor us. They help us know who we are. They remind us of what's true and what's real. You can tell this is one of my deepest passions. Like if I had one thing that I could get across to people, is that God is real and he actually wants to spend time. He actually wants, he's not looking for you to do something.
Yeah.
He doesn't need you to do anything. He can do it easier without you than he can with you. But he likes you and he wants to be with you. And just coming to that reality, man. That's everything.
And there's something to the rhythm of, sometimes we lose like the feasts that were given to Israel. They were the Lord's feasts, not Israel's.
Yes.
And they revealed something about Jesus. They revealed something about the Father. It revealed the plan of redemption. But there's something about being in the rhythm of what we've experienced as the inheritance of our faith. Like stuff like Lent, for example. We did Lent last year and I posted about it and everyone was like, isn't Lent like a Catholic thing? Or like, that rhythm, it kind of got lost. And I explained to them, like, actually, we always talk about, coming into the new year. I said, what a better place to actually fast and prepare yourself to come into than the cross.
Yes.
As the origin point. And I said, and so that's connected to the catechumen. It's connected to the early church's discipleship process that for 40 days, these people would spend 2-3 years before they were baptized as inquirers, as novitiates, and they would come into this 40-day period, this rhythm, where they were instructed and then baptized and then welcomed into the fellowship of the believers. Like, when we sing like Be Thou My Vision, that's a Celtic poem from the 6th century. There's something that I think that's in the heart of God where he hears the same songs being sung to him from the saints through the ages. When we live something that connects us, I think part of the heart of the spirit of Elijah isn't just restoration between generations, but that our hearts would be restored back to the fathers of the church. Because we're children of the church to some degree.
That's so good.
So this restoration of the generations, this rhythm of coming into Lent, coming into the rhythm of how the early church lived, I think there's some richness in it because there's a legacy where the Hebrews' reality of we're being made perfect together with those, the heroes of the faith. Like we are corporately coming together as one bride before the Father. And I think there's some beauty that we've missed because it's religious or traditional. That should be part of our inheritance.
So good.
Yes.
I never thought of that. I have not been contemplative enough. I haven't thought about the Lord hearing those through the ages. How beautiful. How beautiful that I think about legacy a lot, but I hadn't thought about it that way. So it's really beautiful.
Yeah. So good.